Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October Research Keys to Real Estate podcast. I'm your host, Mary Schuster. Thank you for joining us. And before we go to our first guest, I wanted to say a few quick words about why we created this show. We know that our sector of the economy, the real estate ecosystem, is a vital element in the health of our greater economy as a whole. And we know that those who work in our sector can never have too many resources in their corner to aid in making their businesses, their careers, and themselves more successful. At October Research, our portfolio of publications are the best and most crucial source of deep learning for the industry. Our national seminars like NS3 and the Women's Leadership Summit, as well as our ongoing educational webinars, are an opportunity to dive down further in depth with the topics at hand. This podcast should not replace any of your existing education streams, but rather it's meant to be a companion learning vehicle, one that you can take with you on the go and that you can consume whenever you choose. We also structured it to be a free resource in order to help serve as a supplement to the training and learning you provide to your associates, colleagues, and peers. So whether you're listening as you're commuting to or from work, or while you're doing your weekend chores, or if you prefer and are watching us on YouTube, we hope you'll enjoy the wide-ranging guests and topics selected with you in mind. Now, our first guest really needs no introduction. Industry legend Phil Schulman is here. Phil graciously agreed to join us to reflect on his career, talk about what life is like in retirement, and generally share his advice and wisdom gained throughout his years of service to our industry. Now, this episode is a lengthy one, but I believe it's completely worth it. So thanks for coming along with us and enjoy this very first episode with the incomparable Mr. Phil Schulman. The presenting sponsor of the Keys to Real Estate podcast is RamQuest. RamQuest fosters a customer-first culture built around an unwavering commitment to provide solutions that don't just meet, but exceed expectations. RamQuest's newest title and settlement production solution, Horizon, delivers unparalleled efficiency, robust features, and scalability to ensure you have tools to boost productivity and elevate performance like never before. Horizon streamlines your operation with secure 24/7 access, automatic updates, and all the power that only the cloud can offer. Plus, Horizon offers a direct connection to the industry's most extensive network of service providers and partners. Experience Horizon for yourself when you visit ramquest.com. And now, please enjoy the show. Phil Schulman, you are our first guest on this new educational and multimedia platform. And at Keys to Real Estate, we know we aren't the first podcast in this space. However, we are committed to being the best podcast in this space. And as we were mapping out the launch of the podcast and the arc of our first season, Eric and I both knew we wanted you as our leadoff batter. So I know I promised no RESPA questions in this discussion. But it feels like we're out here in the trenches without our General Patton. Maybe you prefer to be MacArthur or Marshall. All that to say, we miss you and we missed your voice. So thank you so very much for being our inaugural guest today.
Well, thank you, Mary. Thank you for those kind words. The kind of words that my father probably would be proud of and my mother would believe. So I'm honored to be the first guest. I hope I'm not the last, and I hope I don't sink this podcast. But you know that I'm a big fan of October Research. I've been associated with October Research really since the days that Joe Casa founded it. And then when Erica bought it and turned it into the juggernaut that it is today, October Research has allowed me really to help build my practice. You gave me lots of opportunities to speak at your conferences. I probably spoke at every NS3 conference from the very first one till just before I retired. And I probably did 25 or 30 webinars for you guys. So there isn't anything I wouldn't do for Erica and for you in October Research. So thank you for having me. I don't know what we're going to talk about. We're not talking about RESPA. I'm retired. Thank you. And let's see where we go with this.
All right, well, let's talk about retirement. Everybody wants to know, what have you been doing? How are you keeping busy? What does Phil Schulman do when he's not doing RESPA?
Well, I didn't know what I'd be doing, but I would sum up retirement this way. I get to do more of the things that I want to do and less of the things I don't want to do or have to do, which was just the opposite of when I was working. Because when I was working, I'd get up at 5:45 in the morning, I'd run to the gym, I'd run to catch breakfast, get in the office at 9. I wouldn't get home till 8 o'clock at night. And then I'm downstairs in my office working on more matters and writing speeches and so forth, like a hamster on a hamster wheel. And now I sleep till 8:30 in the morning. I read 2 newspapers from cover to cover. I play golf 3 or 4 times a week, and I'm getting pretty good at it. I serve on 2 board of directors of organizations that mean a lot to me. I do some charity work. And I know it sounds corny, but the best thing about retirement for me is getting to spend time with my family and I'd get home 8:30 at night. My wife would go to bed at 9 or 9:30, and I'm downstairs, and I would only see her on weekends. Now I get to see her all the time. We go to Costco. I'd never been to Costco before. We go to Costco on Mondays. Mary, for $2.10, you can get a slice of pizza that is about the same size as a Chevy Equinox. I mean, it's unbelievable, that place. So we've gotten to travel. I normally only took like 5 days off and 2 weekends on either side. And now we just came back from Southeast Asia. We were in Vietnam and Cambodia and Thailand and hoping to go to South Africa in the fall. So all of those things are just great. But the best part, bar none, is getting to spend time with my 2 grandchildren, because I always felt guilty that I didn't spend enough time with my 2 daughters. And now I made a promise to myself that when I have grandchildren, I'm going to pour back into them all the things I wish I had done with my own kids. So I have a 19-month-old grandson named Noah. I think he was about 12 or 13 months. My wife and I are babysitting, and he's in the high chair. And he sticks his hand in his diaper and pulls out a recent deposit and then starts giving himself a head massage. And my wife is screaming, "Get him into the shower. Get him into the shower." And I'm sitting there. "This is not funny," she says. I said, "Harriet, I'm not laughing. I'm just thinking, we do not have to start a 529 college fund for this kid. I'm serious. He's not going to college. He's a moron." So actually, he's not. He's a smart little boy, and that was a one-time thing, thank goodness. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, Zoe. She means the world to me. We play Barbies. My kids had like 30 or 40 Barbie dolls that they wouldn't let us throw out. My granddaughter found them. Zoe and I played Barbies twice a week. We are going to Barbie dream houses. We go to Barbie nursery school. We go to Barbie birthday parties. We're very busy. I have seen the Disney movie Frozen, 74 times. I like Olaf and Kristoff, but not that much. But one of the great things about my granddaughter is she has a knack for telling jokes. And I am so proud of her, because at 5, she's starting to have really the timing and the rhythm and the tempo that you need for doing jokes. However, at the moment, I'm on something called double secret probation. I'm not allowed to tell her any jokes anymore. I will tell you what happened. I didn't think it was that terrible, but I'm now before a censorship board. So I say to my granddaughter, I said, "Zoe, do you know why 6 is afraid of 7? Poppy, it's because 7, 8, 9. I said, "No, sweetheart, that's what everybody thinks, but I will tell you the real reason." So she goes to preschool. She says to Miss Callista, "Miss Callista, do you know why 6 is afraid of 7? And Miss Callista says, "Well, Zoe, we talked about this yesterday. It's because 7, 8, 9. And Zoe said, "No, my poppy says it's because 7 is a 6 offender." Well, that was it. I mean, Miss Callista calls my daughter Tammy. Tammy calls me. I am on double secret probation. But I'm telling you, I love retirement because, as I said before, get to do the things I want to do, not as many that I have to do.
We were all rooting that for you, and I am thrilled to hear that the sense of humor has showed up in that second next generation
Yes,
down too.
the
That's
DNA, the
great.
DNA is passed through to the next
That's
generation.
fantastic. And I wonder, I think we all recall your use of humor and jokes in presentations. And do you think that is an ability that is sort of essential for success in business? Or you think it's a critical element?
Oh, that's a good question. Look, I think you can be a good husband, you can be a good wife, you can be a good title agent, a good mortgage banker, and not be able to tell a joke. But I think that there is a place for humor in business. It can be used very effectively. People love to laugh, and if you can make them laugh, they'll love you. And there have been all kinds of studies that have shown that sales reps who use humor or comedy or jokes in their pitches have as much as a 20% higher hit rate than those that don't. So, yes, I think there's a place for comedy. I can remember many times in my career, not just when I gave a speech, because I always told a joke with every speech I ever gave, but many times I was in tense negotiations with the Department of Justice or the CFPB, and there's a lot of tension and friction. And I found that if I injected humor, if I told a joke, that it kind of dissipated the tension and people shared a common moment. And I thought it was effective. So, do I think it's effective? I do. But as I said, I think you could probably be successful and still not be able to tell a joke.
Well, so that causes me to wonder, have you always told jokes? Was that always sort of innate in your nature?
Yes. Yes. I can remember being 6 or 7 years old, and my Uncle Maury told jokes. And we would go to his house on a Sunday, and there'd be a barbecue with the whole family. And I watched as my Uncle Maury told jokes, and everybody was on the edge of their seat. Because what is a joke? It's a short story with a funny ending. And as I said, people love to laugh. And I watched how he captured the crowd, and he decided when he timed that punchline, and everybody would explode into laughter. And I said, I want to do that. And so I have always been fascinated by jokes. And I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. I know north of 1,000 jokes. And I would say that there probably isn't a joke that I don't know. In fact, I used to say to clients, if you can give me a joke that I can use in a speech, not a joke that I would tell to a sailor on leave, but a joke that I could use in a speech, I'd give you an hour of free legal services. And during my career, there were 3 or 4 people who gave me really great, very funny jokes. And I did give them the hour. Now, one of the things you hear from people when telling jokes is that, you know, I don't remember them. I'm not good at jokes. I get nervous, or I'm just not funny. And the truth of the matter is, you don't have to be funny to tell a joke. If the joke is funny, you just have to know how to deliver it. And that comes with practice. And if I can make a shameless promo here, one of the things I've done in retirement is I've created a comedy gig for about an hour where I go through the elements of a joke. I call the session, "What do you mean you can't tell a joke? You're in sales." And I go through and try to dispel all the notions of why people can't tell a joke. I go through the 3 elements of a joke. Every joke has a setup, anticipation, and punchline. And I do jokes that accentuate each of those elements. I, of course, have a top 10 list of do's and don'ts. You have to have that. And then we have the audience get up and tell jokes. The folks from the company judge them, and we give prizes for the best and worst jokes. And it's a lot of fun. So, if anybody out there would like to do something like that for their company, by all means, give me a holler.
Oh, I love that you're teaching that because, yes, it is a knack, a skill. And I love to hear you say that it doesn't necessarily need to be innate. It can be learned. And so you've kind of got some of us have been to Toastmasters. Sounds like you've got joke masters. So that's great. I love that.
I
I
can
wonder, do you
help you,
have a
Mary.
favorite?
Mary, I can help you.
Tell me. Yeah, I need the help. I always get the timing wrong, or when the timing's right, when I'm feeling my oats, then I forget the actual joke itself. So I need to come to one of your classes. But I've always wanted to ask you if you have do you have a favorite? Are they like pets? Like, do you just love them all equally, or do you have a favorite?
Favorite. Not really, because every joke that I have is like a child to me. Because when I get a joke, I hear it, I then dissect it, and I put it back together based on things from my life to make it personal, and then to use language that I would use and that I'm comfortable with telling the joke. So I don't know that I have a favorite. There's still a half a dozen or so that I've told 100 times that still make me laugh, even though I know the punchline. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll share with you, because I've done a lot of speeches. And I actually, for this podcast, I was thinking I did about 20 speeches a year for 46 years. That's hundreds. And I can remember the worst experience I had telling a joke and then the best experience. So I'll share those with you. Both of them happened in Texas. When I started out my career at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, one of the jobs I had was counsel to the Inspector General's office. And they wanted me to go down to Houston, Texas, and speak to about 250 FBI agents on mortgage fraud, and in particular, FHA mortgage fraud, which I was well versed on. So again, knowing me, I start with a joke and I try to have it be either relevant to the topic or relevant to the people in the audience. So I said, last week I had dinner with an FBI agent and the bill came and, I left $3 and he left 3 pennies. And the waiter was perturbed, but he was cool about it. And he said, sir, you can tell a lot about a customer by the kind of tip they leave. And so the FBI agent said, well, what can you tell about me? And the waiter picked up the first penny and he said, well, with this first penny, sir, I can tell that you're somebody who's thorough, who likes to get to the bottom of things, who seeks truth and justice. The fellow said, I'm an FBI agent. That's exactly what I do. That's fascinating. What else can you tell? And the waiter picked up the second penny and he said, well, with the second penny, he says, I can tell that you're a bachelor. Oh, the FBI agent said, unbelievable. I am single. What else can you tell? And with that, the waiter picked up the third penny and he said, well, with this third penny, sir, he says, I can tell your father was a bachelor also. Nobody laughs. Nothing. I'm hitting the mic. Hello, testing 1, 2. Nothing. And I'm hoping that maybe the earth will open and I'll be swallowed in, because nothing. It was horrible. It was a 45-minute speech. I did it in 11 minutes and got the hell out of there. And that was the worst experience. The best also happened in Texas, where I got a standing ovation for an opening joke. I was at the University of Texas in Austin. I was speaking to the Texas Land Title Association. And they have a thing where all these Texas lawyers, they wait until the very last end of the year to get their continuing education credits. And so the room is packed. There's probably 1,000 people there. And I said, last night I was having dinner at a restaurant and a guy about 5'4" wearing a University of Texas sweatshirt comes up to the bar there and he says in a loud voice, hey, you want to hear a joke about those dumb Aggie football players? And with that, a guy about 6'8", 260, picks this little guy up by his neck and he says, I happen to be the starting defensive tackle for the Texas A&M Aggies. And you see that guy down the end of the bar and he whips his head, 6'4", 240. He's our starting tight end. And you see the guy next to him, 6 feet, 330 pounds. He's our starting nose guard. You still feel like telling that joke? And the little guy shook his head. He said, not now. Not if I'm going to have to explain it 3 times. Oh, my goodness, Mary. The place erupted. It was the biggest laugh I've ever gotten, standing ovation, except for the 3 people who were from Texas A&M. And I will never, never forget that moment.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Well, and I know you have given so many presentations, hundreds, if not thousands. And I wonder, what are some more of the memorable moments that you've had over the years?
Well, I have done hundreds and thousands, maybe 1,000. I don't know. Certainly 800 or 900. And I can't tell you how many times I said RESPA is a dual purpose statute. It's consumer information and an anti kickback statute. And all of that stuff kind of melts in your head. And sometimes I do wake up in the middle of the night screaming 8C4. But the best moments that I ever had in giving speeches were things that happened that the audience did that was unscripted and just brought the house down. So I'll share a couple of them with you. And let me tell you something, Mary, this is a lot more fun than talking about RESPA for me.
Okay, good.
So let me at least part some wisdom here. If you're asked to speak at a conference, first, if you're just starting out, you speak wherever they tell you. But if you get some notoriety and they're wanting you to be a speaker, I'll tell you the two places you don't want to speak and where you do. You don't want to speak the last session of a 2-day seminar, okay? Because when you do that, nobody's left, and those people who are there are just waiting to get their cab or Uber to the airport. And one time I was asked by Bob Levy from the New York, New Jersey Mortgage Bankers Association to speak. They have about 3,000 people in Atlantic City every year. And I said, boy, this is going to be great. But he gave me the Tuesday afternoon at 4:00. I think there were 6 people there. We could have had the thing in my room. And I said, that'll never happen again. The second worst is after lunch. And the reason is because people eat that god awful chicken lunch and they have a gooey dessert and then they want to fade. So if you have your choice, you always want to speak on the first day and you want to be in the morning because people are bright eyed and bushy tailed. They haven't gotten into their networking and their phone calls yet, and they do come to the opening session. So that's where you make your mark. Anyway, one time I had to give a speech right after lunch, about 200 people in Miami. And I noticed there's a guy in the front row and the head is starting to bob and weave and the eyes are starting to flutter. And I know he's going out for the count, but I'm okay with it because he's in the front row and maybe 6 or 7 people can see it. But then he starts snoring and he's very loud. And now I can't. There's no way I can ignore it. So I lean over the podium. Oh my goodness. I'm on a podcast. Go figure. People want to hear me. I'm sorry we can't talk now. I hope that wasn't the police. Anyway, I'm not going to get through this story. So he's fading. He starts snoring. And there's no way I can ignore it. And everybody in the audience can hear it. So I stop my presentation. I lean over the podium and I said to a lady next to him, hey, would you mind waking him? And I'll never forget this. She goes, hey, you put him to sleep. You wake him. The place went berserk. It was the best. We did wake him and he wasn't too happy about it, a little embarrassed. When you give a speech for 45 minutes or an hour, you've got to break it up because people's attention span is maybe 12 minutes tops. So I usually would introduce 3 or 4 jokes during an hour presentation, or I would always try to get the audience to participate because then they're asking questions that they want the answers to. And I would always say, listen, let's see if we can get a dialogue going. If you can ask me a RESPA question that I don't know the answer to, I will give you an hour of free legal services, which from a Washington, D.C. attorney is probably the same price as a Toyota Camry. So it's very much a thing of value. So I go into the presentation in Denver and I'm maybe 2 minutes into it and a guy raises his hand. Mr. Schulman, can I ask you a question? I said, this is great. Got a dialogue going. I said, sure, sir. What's your question? He said, Mr. Schulman, why would I want an hour of free legal services from a guy who doesn't know the answer to my question? And the place, of course, erupted. And I thought about it, and I thought he was right. And I said, you know what? I don't know why you'd want it. You know what? I'm going to give you the free hour. And he said in a loud voice, don't want it. And the place went crazy. So that was just a lot of fun. One other, or maybe there's one I heard this morning that someone reminded me of when I told them I was going to do this. I get invited by a woman who's the head of or president, I guess, of the uh, Mortgage Bankers Association of Puerto Rico. And she says, Phil, can you come down to our national and annual convention in San Juan? And I said to her, Eva, I would be happy to, but I don't speak Spanish. And oh, Phil, please, everyone speaks English. You don't insult us. Oh, no, 1,000 apologies. Of course I'll come. But I said, got to be in the morning. Want to be the first speaker? Absolutely, Phil. You will be our first speaker. But first, the governor will speak, and then the director of the government office of mortgage banking. Just for a few minutes, Phil. I go, it's fine. So they got a nice crowd. The governor gets up and he speaks in Spanish for 7 or 8 minutes and welcomes everybody. And I go, okay, it's Spanish. He's Spanish. Of course, they're not going to speak in English. The director of the mortgage bankers department gets up. He does 7 or 8 minutes all in Spanish. So now I'm getting a little nervous, but Eva promised me. Then she gets up and introduces me in Spanish. And then I get up on the stage and I go, Eva, what's going on? And she then tells everybody to put headsets on, and there's a translator in the booth, and I should go ahead and start my presentation. So that was a little disconcerting, but I go through the thing, and as I tell you, I've got 4 or 5 jokes that I'm going to do to try to break the thing up, and I'm telling the jokes, and she's translating, and I notice that there's a guy about 4 rows up on the end. He's not laughing. And I'm looking to break up the crowd a little and just do something unusual. So I get off the stage. I walk through the crowd. I go up to this guy standing, or rather sitting on the aisle. I ask him to stand. Then I asked the woman to come out of the translation booth. And I said to her, would you do me a favor? Ask this guy whether my jokes aren't funny or you're just doing a bad job translating. And she says, and he said, I said, what did he say? And she said, he says you're just not that funny. And the place went crazy. So that was a lot of fun. And then I talked to a very good friend of mine this morning, Joe Drum. I know you know Joe. Everybody in the title industry knows Joe. Yeah. And he reminded me of an incident. It was during the Winter Olympics. And I was speaking at a conference. And of course, I start with a joke. And so I do the joke. And Joe is there with 4 or 5 other people, Jim O'Donnell and a bunch of other guys that you may know. And they all stand up with placards. And it says 3, 4, 7, 9, 0. And I said, Joe, what is that? He said, we are the Olympic comedy judges. And I said, what's this? He said, these are your scores. And I said, well, who gave me the 0? And Joe, without missing a beat, said, that's the East German judge. He doesn't like anybody. And the place went nuts. So those are my most favorite moments. And those are the ones I cherish the most, not the 700 or 800 RESPA speeches I gave in my career.
Oh, those are amazing gems. I love hearing about them. And while I am firmly convinced you could have had a full and robust career as a stand-up, you chose the law. And I've long wondered, did you always want to be an attorney?
Well, originally I wanted to be a cowboy when I was about 7 or 8, but my parents would not buy me a horse. And even then at 7, I knew it would not be cool to be riding a bike and shooting at bad guys. So I decided I'm out of the cowboy business. But I was 11 years old, and there was a show on television called Perry Mason. And this was the first lawyer TV drama on television, and I watched it religiously. And I saw this show, and I said, my God, that's a great job, being a lawyer. I mean, it's indoor work. There doesn't appear to be any heavy lifting. He's wearing a suit and tie, and he destroys people on the stand. And then I find out there is no math or science required. So I'm in. From the time I'm 11 through grade school, high school, and college, I knew I was going to be a lawyer. And really, being a lawyer suited my talents. I think that when we get a career that we enjoy, it's usually because we're good at that. Things that we're good at that we do make us happy. And lawyering suited my strengths because I'm a good writer and I have good oral advocacy skills. So I love being a lawyer. And the great thing about being a lawyer, two things that are great about being a lawyer. One, no 2 days are ever the same. No two clients are ever the same. No two legal issues are ever the same. And the law is always changing. And so you're always learning and you're always pivoting. And I really enjoyed that. And the other thing is, I have an opinion on everything, including that sweater you're wearing, Mary. Um, and I would tell people my opinion for nothing. But when you're a lawyer, they pay you a lot of money for your opinion. So, yes, I knew way back in seventh and eighth grade that I wanted to be a lawyer.
Well, and we were the beneficiaries of that, but I love how you mentioned that when your natural abilities align with your profession, just that's sort of you're in the zone then, right? Then it's just a big adventure. I feel the same way about the title insurance business. No 2 days are the same, and it is not possible to learn it all because it's ever changing. Do you happen? I'm curious. Do you happen to remember your first case?
Mary, you are leading into my strengths here. Um, you never forget your first kiss or your first case. And I'm going to tell you a story that is every word of this is true. I'm not making it up. A lot of
Okay.
times I do, but this one I'm not. So, my first case, the first trial I ever did, I was 16 years old. And I know you say to yourself, 16, I mean, who was your client? I was my client. And here's the story.
Okay.
I went to a high school that was being refurbished, so we would go like 6:30 in the morning. We'd get through at 1 o'clock. And so I always worked in a warehouse after school. And for the first 2 years or so, I unloaded boxes on a loading dock. But when I got to be 16 and got my driver's license, and this business sold toiletries and cosmetics to grocery stores and pharmacies, they had me deliver in the afternoons. And so I had a station wagon and they'd fill it up with 5 or 6 orders, and I would drive around, and it was a lot better than lifting heavy boxes. So it's Tuesday afternoon in Utica, New York. I'm on Bleecker Street. I kind of roll through this intersection, and out of the corner of my eye, my right eye, I see a stop sign. But you can hardly see this thing because it's covered in a huge bush. But I see it. I stop, I back up, I wait 3 seconds, and I proceed. With that, a police cruiser comes from behind the bush, pulls me over. Son, you ran the stop sign. Well, no, I didn't, officer. If you saw, I saw the stop sign. I could hardly see it. Looked like a stop sign trap to me, but I saw it. I backed up and I waited. And he said, no, I'm sorry, you ran the stop sign. I'm going to have to give you a ticket. And he's got the ticket book out. And now I'm desperate because in New York State, if you get a moving violation during your probation period, you lose your license for a year. So I tell him, officer, if I get a ticket, I'm going to lose my license. If I lose my license, I'll lose my job. And I'm trying to put myself through school, not having any of this. So I hit him with another sauce, but I said, look, I'm going out with Cookie Weinstein. And if I can't drive at night, Cookie's not going to walk. I'm going to tell you that now. I really need my car and my license. Not having any of it, he gives me a ticket. And now I'm angry. And I remember pointing my finger and I said, I watched Perry Mason. I will see you in court. So I plead not guilty. I get a summons to go to court 3 weeks. And Mary, for the next 3 weeks, I'm focused on preparing for trial. I go to the scene of the crime 3 or 4 times. I take Polaroid pictures of the sign. I measure the bush, the height, the width, the depth. I wait and record people going through, whether they stop or not, whether they can see this thing. I've got charts and graphs. I'm standing in front of my mirror for 3 weeks working on my opening statement, and I'm pretty sure I can get this cop to cry. I'm not nervous at all. The big day comes. I put on my only suit, my only tie. I go down on Genesee Street in Utica. I go to the courthouse. I'm sitting outside the traffic courthouse there. And who walks by but Judge Himes? Now, Judge Himes is the father of my friend Harold Himes. Philip, what are you doing here? Well, Your Honor, I got a ticket for running a stop sign, but I really didn't run it. I've got graphs and charts and and he says, Philip, let's not talk about it in the hallway. Come into my chambers. So I go into his chambers and I pour my heart out. I got the graphs, the charts. I got everything. I work on my opening statement in front of him. And he says, Philip, two things. Number one, I'm the judge for traffic court this month. And number two, after listening to your story, it's your word against the policeman's. And in 22 years of doing this, I always take the policeman's word. Now, if that happens, Philip, because you're in your probationary period, as you know, you're going to lose your license for a year. But if you plead guilty to a faulty muffler, that's a $10 fine. There are no points, and you can drive yourself home. So let me ask you something, Philip. Do you want your day in court, or would you like to plead guilty to a faulty muffler? Mary, my whole life was in front of me at that moment in time. I came to really one of the first crosswalks, one of the first splits in the road where I had to make a decision. Now, I'm innocent, Mary, and I've got the charts and graphs to prove it, and I can beat this case because I didn't do anything wrong. But then I'm running through the options, kind of a benefit cost thing, and I'm thinking, well, he tells me that he's going to side with the policeman. If I lose my license, I lose my job, I don't have money for school. If I lose my license, there's no nookie with cookie. It's not going to happen. But I'm innocent. So I think about it, and I look him straight in the eye, and I said, Your Honor, when I leave here, I'm going right to Midas Muffler and get that muffler replaced. And he said, good choice, Philip. And so I walked out of the courthouse and I was thinking to myself, you know something? I'm going to be a hell of a lawyer. I mean, I came this close to losing my license and I walk out with a $10 fine. I'm a genius. So that was my first case. And I'll tell you what it did teach me. It taught me that you have to be prepared. You have to have a game plan for whatever the matter is or the objective is. But you can't be so wedded to that plan that if it changes, and most of the time it does, that never goes according to your game plan. You have to pivot, you have to be flexible, and you have to make up a new plan on the run. For me, that was pleading to a faulty muffler. Anyway,
That sounds like very.
That was my first trial.
That's such good advice. I love the story, but the advice that you extrapolate out of that story is really great. I'm wondering, like from your career, we have some folks listening who are not yet on your side of retirement, and I wonder, are there some lessons that have guided your career that you could share with listeners, something that served you well or that you feel is of critical importance?
Well, I will tell you the lesson that I learned from my father that was the most important lesson I ever learned in my life. And it was a lesson that guided me throughout my life, throughout my career, and even prepared me for this podcast. So I will share that story with you. I think Paul Simon saying about all the crap he learned in high school, but for me, high school was a formative time. So I learned a lot in high school. In New York State, you had to write a senior thesis in order to graduate senior English and get a Regents certificate and be eligible for Regents scholarship and so forth. And so you would pick a topic. Mine was skepticism in the 60s. And there was a Time magazine article in 1967 with a big question mark that said, is God dead? And it went through the decline in organized religion. And so I chose that. And, you have to hand in an outline and then a bibliography. And then at the end of the year, you do 15 pages. And the day before it's due, on a Sunday morning, I'm down on the kitchen table writing one page, running upstairs. My mother types it. I come down, write page 2, run upstairs. She types it. I get it to 15 pages. I said, Mom, can you triple space it here so we can get to 15 pages? We get the thing done. I'm already accepted at college. I really don't think much about it. my teacher says, Philip, can I talk to you after class? It's about your senior thesis. And I'm going, oh my God, I hope I didn't screw it up. Because if I fail English, I don't graduate with my class. I'll have to take English in summer school. I'm a wreck. And I start to walk up to her desk after everybody leaves. And she says, Philip, I just want to tell you that in my 32 years of teaching, this was the finest senior thesis I've ever read. And she said, I had no idea you were interested in theology. So now I'm just kind of milking it a little bit. I said, well, I've always been interested in theology. I'll probably become a rabbi after college. I don't know. And she says, well, then you'll be pleased to know that I entered your thesis in the Upton Oration Contest. And they pick 5 theses, and then you do this oration contest. The winner receives a $500 scholarship, which in 1967 was a lot of money. I mean, in today's dollars, it might be 1.6 million or something. It was a lot of money for a kid. And you spoke at graduation. Now, we had almost 900 kids in our class, and everybody gets 4 tickets. There would be 3,000 to 4,000 people at the War Memorial Auditorium. And I thought, I'm not going to win this thing, but I'm going to give it a shot. So I work with Mrs. Hogan every day after class. And it's an oration contest. So we have no notes, no podium, no microphone, just on a stage for about 9 minutes. So she's teaching me to project my voice, how to use my hands, how to walk on the stage and so forth. And I'm feeling pretty good. And I'm working on the speech. So one night my father says to me, Philip, after dinner, come do your speech for me. I want to help you. And Mary, when you're 17 years old, you pretty much know everything there is to know in the world. There's not much else to know. And I was a little bit sassy and not happy about it. I said to my dad, Dad, you never went to college. You don't give speeches. How are you going to help me? And he said, Philip, I don't give speeches, but I sit in the audience and listen to speeches. And I know a good speech when I hear one. So show me what you've got. So after dinner, I did my speech, I projected, I did the hand motions, I walked around the living room feeling pretty good. And my father looked and I said, what do you think? And he looked up to me and he said, Philip, you're focused on how you sound delivering your words to the audience. You're focused on you and not focused on the guy sitting in the chair who's receiving those words, who's hearing those words. And if you want to give a good speech, you don't focus on what you sound like. You focus on what you hear like. And Mary, it was like a lightning bolt hit my house because it made perfect sense to me that that's the way you deliver a speech. And I won that oration contest because I followed my father's advice. And every speech I've ever written, I've always written it for how it sounds to the person listening. Every settlement I've done with attorneys on the other side, I'm putting myself in their seat, in their shoes. What do they need to hear? What do they need to call this a successful negotiation from their perspective? And when you do that, you are always going to be delivering the best that you can. So my advice, deliver for the guy across the negotiating table, deliver for the guy sitting in the chair, deliver for the audience when you give a presentation. Do not focus on what you sound like. That, Mary, is the best advice I ever got in my life.
That is the best advice I've ever heard, Phil. It's it's funny. I certainly didn't arrive at it as elegantly, but as you know, I speak a lot in public too, and so many people ask, how can you do that? I'm terrified of it, and I have the same secret that you have, which is it's not about me. It's about what the audience and them receiving the information that I need to convey. And the secret to that is, and I have a little mantra before I take the stage each time, which is just let me give the people what they need, because that's what it's about. And there's the secret in there is it takes all the anxiety away because it's not about you anymore. It's about them. And suddenly you're not nervous. It's the most freeing thing, I think. And I love that your dad gave you that advice and you verified it with experience early on.
Oh, no, it absolutely worked. Here's the other thing, speakers sometimes they want to show how intelligent they are and they want to show off a little bit. I'm thinking, what does the audience want to hear? So I'm thinking, they need to know three things. So I will tell them, look, there are three things you need to know. Now they're focused. Now they know 1, 2, and 3. And when they take their notes, they know that there are going to be three things coming, and that's going to help them get through it. So I'm thinking about them just like you are. It makes common sense, but people don't really think about it.
Right. Yeah. And part of it is because societally, I think we're taught to be afraid. And it is unnatural when you have 1,000 people or 400 people sitting facing, and you're the one standing alone facing outward. It can be awkward, but only really, I think, truly if you're hyper focused on what you're experiencing rather than what they're experiencing. I love that. And I did not get you here under false pretenses. I will not ask you for some deep RESPA analysis, but I did have one curious question about just at the surface level. How did you end up becoming a RESPA expert? What led you there?
I will tell you that, but let me get back to the other thing just to say,
oh, good. Okay.
Mary, you have to have a little bit of ham in you too. You have to really enjoy being the center of attention. That does come with it, but you've got to focus on the other guy, not yourself. So anyway,
that's fair.
How did I become a RESPA attorney? By accident, and really by chance, because I was in charge of enforcement and compliance at HUD. I was there 11 years, and the last 6 years I was an assistant general counsel in charge of all enforcement matters. And we used to suspend the licenses of mortgage bankers. We debarred and suspended program participants. I did a lot of administrative trials, but never once in those 11 years did we ever bring a RESPA case. There was no RESPA enforcement when I was at HUD. And I left HUD in 1986. I became a partner at a firm called Brownstein, Zeidman, and Laurie in about 1989. In about 1990, there was a guy named Dave Williams who took over RESPA, and he decided he was going to start to enforce Section 8 of the anti-kickback provisions of RESPA. And the very first case that came out was against a title attorney in Dallas, Texas, a woman who you probably may know. She was fairly well known in the industry. And she was looking for a lawyer, and she knew I was a HUD lawyer, and this was a HUD matter, and so she hired me. And I didn't know a thing about RESPA. Nobody did, really. And I did explain to her that this is the very first enforcement case. And I took it, and I got her a great result. And then the second enforcement case was against a title agency that I think they gave too much money, allegedly, to a real estate broker to rent an office, and that was considered a kickback. And I handled that case and got that one resolved. And I started thinking to myself, this is going to be a brand new area of enforcement, and nobody's in this space. I'm going to cover this space. And so I got together with my partner, Larry Platt, and we wrote a book for a legal publishing company. It was called A Practical Guide to the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. And it was the first time in civilization that the words practical and RESPA were mentioned in the same sentence, because, come on, there's nothing practical about RESPA. But I started writing on RESPA. I started giving speeches. I started talking about, well, this is how the government handles these cases. I know there had only been 2 of them. And for a brief moment in time, I had the field to myself. But then, guys like Jay Varon and Mitch Keider and Brian Levy and Mark Sturbkow and Rich Andriano, Loretta Salzano, and my own Holly Bunting caught up. But that was good, because competition breeds excellence. You've got to be really good. When there are a lot of really good RESPA lawyers out there, you've got to distinguish yourself, and they make you better. So that's how I got there. I'll just say one thing about being blessed to be a RESPA lawyer. And you say, again, probably never anybody put blessings and RESPA in the same sentence either, but I'm going to do it for this reason. I came out of HUD a mortgage banking attorney. And if you're a mortgage banking attorney and you're going to specialize in an area of law, maybe the statute you pick is the Truth in Lending Act, or the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, or the Fair Credit Reporting Act, or the Fair Housing Act. All of those statutes are very important and require expertise. But the thing is, they apply only to creditors, to lenders who make loans, or mortgage brokers. When you are a RESPA expert, you have the world as your oyster. Every single settlement service provider is affected by RESPA. Every mortgage banker and broker, every title company and title agent, every banker, every builder, every appraiser, every home inspector. And so you know that you don't have to just focus on the Mortgage Bankers Association. And during my career, I did work for the NAR, I did work for the MBA, I did work for Alta, for the Mortgage Brokers Association. It was a great way to get clients. So I was just lucky. RESPA have been very, very good to me. I don't have any tattoos, but if I ever got one, it would be RESPA. So that's how I became a RESPA attorney.
Well, and now that I have that muscle warmed up a little bit, again, I will not drag you down into the RESPA weeds. You've earned your right to be free of that. But just when you're not going to Costco, I've been wondering. We've had some of the NAR settlements going on, and I wonder if you have any thoughts about what I don't need the particulars from you, the details, but do you have any forecast of how you think that might change business?
Well, I'm going to Costco and I am playing with the Barbie's Dollhouse and Dreamhouse quite a bit. So I'm not following this stuff as closely as I would, because if I were still in practice, for sure, I would have written on this subject. I would have made sure I got to all the trade associations and did this stuff, went to October Research and asked you if I could do a webinar or whatever. But I don't have to do that anymore. So I'm just looking at this stuff from 30,000 feet. But my brain still works. So I will tell you this. The issue had to do with the fact that if you were a listing broker, if you were the seller's agent and you wanted your home listed on the multiple listing service, you had to agree to split your commission, your 6%, with the buyer's agent. And so that sets up a competitive issue and a fiduciary issue for that agent, because their loyalty is to the buyer, but they're being paid by the seller's agent. And the thought was that this was driving up the cost of commissions. And if the commissions were really more negotiated fairly and openly, that they would come down, and in turn, the price of housing might come down. I read as much as I could on the settlement agreement itself. I don't think that much is going to change. I think that kudos, I'd say, look, kudos to the lawyers who represented the NAR. Yes, they ended up paying $418 million, which is a lot of money to pay over 4 years. But they stopped the bleeding, because they were getting picked off with all of these class action lawsuits, as were some of the large brokerage firms. They stopped the bleeding. I would say what they did is they rearranged the furniture in the house, but they didn't make any structural changes to the house or the property themselves. Example, yes, they took out the clause that says you have to split your commission with me. That's now gone. You're not going to see it in a multiple listing agreement starting in July. But the seller's agent would be allowed to give some kind of rebate or credit to the seller, and the seller could use that money to pay their agent. Or the seller could give money to the buyer directly, not the agent, and again, for the same purpose of paying the buyer's agent. So I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact. However, there may be, and we may start to see, real estate agents who will specialize in just representing buyers and will maybe do it for a flat fee, not as a percentage of, a $500,000 house to get 3% of that, or 3% of $1 million house. Instead, say, look, for $15,000, I will help you buy a house, whether it's a $600,000 house or $1 million house. There may be some of that. And if, in fact, real estate commissions do come down, I'm certain that those real estate brokers and agents are going to look for a way to supplement their income, and they will focus again on affiliated business arrangements, because that is the best way, because they're the point of sale. They see the customer first. They're in a position to be able to refer that customer to a mortgage company, to a title company, to an appraiser, and so forth. So I think we'll start to see, maybe if income does go down for the agents, a rise in and an interest in affiliated business. But we'll see. I don't think it's going to be that much of a change, but we'll know starting in July.
Well, thank you for indulging my question on that. I couldn't have you sitting in this chair and not ask, so I'm grateful for that. I don't want to keep you from your Costco run any longer than I originally requested, but just sort of as we kind of start to land this plane, which I have fully enjoyed the flight, do you have any last words of wisdom for us that are out here still swinging away, or can you give us any Schulmanisms that might be appropriate for the here and now?
Well, Mary, I do love to pontificate, so thank you for the opportunity. Pearls of wisdom, that's a tough one. I used to think that wisdom was knowledge, but I read somewhere once that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Really, because wisdom is good sense. It's judgment, it's insight, it's experience, it's knowledge also. I don't know that I have a lot of wisdom, but I will tell you something that I always told my daughters growing up, and that I also, when I mentored young associates in my law firm, I always told them the same thing. I would tell my little girls when they were small, I would say, guys, there's always going to be somebody taller who jumps higher, runs faster, might get the number one, the highest grade in the class. Don't compare yourself to that person. Be the very best you that you can be. And that means giving 110% to every matter, to every project, because you don't ever want to look back and say, geez, if I'd only studied chapter 20, I might have gotten higher than an 86. If I had only stayed in the law library another hour, I might have found that case. And I think in 46 years of practicing law, I had hundreds of matters, lots and lots of cases, and I won most of them, but I lost a lot too. You can't win them all. But I don't think ever in 46 years, and I mean this, that I ever said, gee, I think I could have done more. Because I always gave 110% to every effort. There's an expression, leave it all out on the field. I always did. And I think that if you take that attitude, whether in business or in life, you'll have fewer regrets. Mary, I'm flat out of wisdom and flat out of Schulmanisms. But
Okay, I'll give you a rest.
I
But let me ask
I
one.
too enjoyed this, so I really thank you for having me, and I hope I don't. Talked about flying and landing this plane. I hope that there'll be many more flights for many people as well, because I think this podcast will be great. So thank you for having me.
We certainly started off well, and let me ask one more question though. If anybody would like for you to come talk to their company or organization about how to give fantastic presentations, is that possible, or was this an exclusive engagement and that's it?
Mary, you're very kind. No, if folks have a sales meeting and they're looking for an hour for something to make people laugh, I can do a gig for you on how to tell a joke, and then we'll get the audience to tell jokes and have a good time. So if people are interested, by all means, give me a holler, and I'd love to do something for you.
That's fantastic. Phil, you are a legend. You, for me, have always represented grace under fire. Your acute legal mind has helped many of us navigate our way through stormy waters over the years. And, importantly, you helped us do it with a laugh in the air and a smile in our step. And as I said at the top, we've really missed you. And I thank you so much for this conversation today, but also for all of your service to us over the years. We appreciate you so much more than you know, but I wanted to make sure to take the opportunity today to tell you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Phil, for the conversation and for everything. Listeners, if you'd like to talk to Phil about the prospect of him teaching your organization how to give captivating presentations by learning how to be funny, and I'm so glad to know that being funny is something that can be learned, his contact information is linked in today's show notes. Thanks again, Phil. We love you. Now, listeners, if you've subscribed or followed our show, we will drop into your feed weekly each Thursday. If you like what we're doing, please share, like, and or review this show. So thank you for joining us today. We'll keep bringing the guests and topics that help you successfully hold your keys to real estate. Until next time, I'm Mary Schuster for October Research, where knowledge is the competitive advantage.